Hello everyone. Today I want to share with you a technique that I use in my classroom, in my virtual classroom, that might help you. Here we go. This technique is called narrating the chat. And now we're going to talk about some of its purposes and functions. So for me, narrating the chat basically looks like a point in the lesson where I ask the students a question. It can be a direct question, such as, what does this word mean? Or can you translate this question? To a more open-ended question, as in, what do you think about XYZ? One of the purposes of narrating the chat is that I can positively frame what the students are saying. For example, if a student submits a particularly high quality answer, I can say, thank you, Samantha, for your brilliant comment. I appreciate what you said about XYZ because of this, this, and this, right? So I can positively frame what the students are saying. This helps to reinforce the classroom culture that I have in my regular classroom or in my traditional classroom. Also, with regards to classroom culture, in my regular classroom, I make it a point to call on every single student every single day. This is to make sure that all of my students feel seen and noticed in my classroom. I might ask them to read something, translate something, answer a question, provide an answer, translate something, whatever that is, right? And I do this every single day. I can't always do this, though, in the virtual classroom because of different types of restrictions and just the setup and the framework of it. So narrating the chat helps me to reinforce that same classroom culture where all of my students feel seen, because when the students submit their answers in the chat, I am narrating what they say. For example, I might say, Samantha, thank you so much for this answer. I see you. Caitlin says that she does XYZ. Ben says that he agrees with Caitlin. Stella says that she does the exact opposite. Oh, and Kylie says this, this, and this, right? So as I'm narrating the chat, all the students feel seen because I make sure to hit on each student at some point during the lesson. So what this also does is it enhances and highlights and expands on great ideas, right? So if I choose a student who had a particularly insightful thought, then what I can do is use that moment to expand on their ideas or their comments. For example, in my class the other day, we were talking about sleep. We were talking about nightmares and dreams and all these interesting things. And one of my students says that she experienced sleep paralysis, right? And what an interesting topic that is. And so when she said that, the chat started lighting up in my class. All the students were like, oh my gosh, lo siento, I'm so sorry, and all these things. And they wanted to hear more about her experience with sleep paralysis. So I was able to expand and highlight and enhance that idea by cold calling on the student. And I asked her, I said, hey, could you tell us a little bit more about sleep paralysis? For example, how long does it last? Does it last a few seconds? Does it last minutes, 15 minutes? Does it last an hour? And what happens to you? Do you freak out? Do you see things? Are you still kind of in a dream state? Are your eyes open? All those types of things. And the student was able to tell us exactly what happens to her. And then I was able to expand on that with a particular story of my own. And the students were on the edge of their seats, so to speak, in the virtual classroom, listening to this comment about sleep paralysis. So the chat and narrating the chat really helps me to make my class more interesting, and it helps the students to feel more engaged because the content is personalized and relevant to them, and they all feel seen. Again, to reiterate, this helps to build the discussion in my classroom. The next thing is that narrating the chat helps to increase participation. Many times teachers have asked me, how do I know whether my students are actually listening to what I'm saying? Well, I use the chat function pretty much the entire time while I'm in chat in the classroom, because I'm asking my students tons of questions, tons of assessment, informal assessment type questions, simple things, because I want my students to stay engaged. And because of the chat, I can see who's participating and who's not, right? And so this allows me to address that. And because each student feels seen, and because I cold call, the students don't know when I'm going to call on them. And so this results in increased participation because they are focused on the material and not playing some game where they can kind of just check out because I'm lecturing, right? The next thing is that narrating the chat helps to emphasize error correction. I like to create a culture of error in my classroom, meaning that I don't want my students to feel like embarrassed if they make a mistake when they're speaking or typing or writing, or reading something. I don't want that to happen. And so this helps me with error correction, because anytime a student makes a mistake and I want to highlight that, I can say, Tommy, thank you so much for your answer. This is a great mistake to make in your sentence. You needed to make this sentence say this to make your idea more clear, or maybe you needed to use a reflexive pronoun here. And then I'll say, okay, guys, I'm going to send this my message to everybody in the chat so you can see what this sentence looks like when the idea is a bit more clear. So then when I submit the sentence to everybody in the chat, this helps to stimulate their thought with regards to grammar knowledge and cultural knowledge and things like this. And I also practice and make this a habit every single day in my classroom, so the students are fully committed to practicing their Spanish skills. So for example, as a reminder to my students every single day that we're in class, I remind them that it's important to view my class as the opportunity to practice their Spanish skills. It's not going to feel exactly like the traditional classroom, and that's okay. This is their opportunity to practice what they've learned, okay? And I'm here to correct them and to make sure that they are improving from day to day. That's what the chat function and narrating the chat allows me to do. Also, one thing that I very much so appreciate about virtual learning that's different than traditional learning, everything has their drawbacks, of course, but one thing I appreciate about virtual learning is that there's typically a lot of consistency in understanding. So for example, if I ask my students to type the definition of a word in the chat, all of them will do that. And this results in increased understanding or consistency in understanding, because I know that there's a guarantee that every single student in the class understands exactly what I'm saying, because the information is public and it's in the chat. And if somebody doesn't know what the question is saying or what the word is saying or whatever we're talking about, they can refer back to the chat. So this helps to make sure that I have symmetrical learning across the board. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope this was helpful for you. Have a great day.